What can happen is that there is some stressor. That can be a pathogen, that can be, for example, histamine or tryptase, which is released because of mental stress or physical stress. Can be oxidative stress, can be anything. And it tries to take this parameter out of the limits of normal functionality. But we have still this resilience capacity. So it is the combination of how strong the resilience is, the capacity is, and how strong the trigger is. And that will determine whether it will be still within the subjective limits of normal functionality. If it is too strong, okay, it will go out and you have, for a certain time, a decreased functionality. Still, the person as such can be healthy. For example, I think that I'm healthy, and if I get a small gastroenteritis, okay, perhaps I'm still a healthy person. By the way, my professor in Sweden for a long, long time, he used to ask the first term medical students who were healthy, and then most of them, of course, raised their fingers and they said, well, they are the people with fantasy. But this is when the trigger is very strong. Of course, it could be also the other way. The trigger is perhaps normally could be within the limits. But if the resilience model, for example, the gastric acid secretion has gone down, or something else, or your immunity is, your immune capacity is less than normal, okay, it will with the same force, the same trigger, it will run out of. This is, for example, what happens perhaps in aging, that these coils are not as strong as they were when you were 52 years of age, which I am. So if we take this then, and we want to study a certain health claim, or to focus on health, my suggestion would be focus on what is the area, what is the domain of functionality you want to study. Perhaps immunity is not always an area of functionality you want to study. Perhaps immunity is involved in this process and you want to look at something else, because it's hard to say that my immune system is better so I have a better functionality. No, my immune system is better and that gives me the ability not to become sick or whatever, not to get a gastroenteritis. So, for example, abdominal comfort is really a good parameter of functionality, or diarrhea, or whatever. So, first of all, we have to select what are functionality domains which are interesting for a health claim. The second point, of course, is can we relate a marker here which is related to this functionality? Sometimes, for example, for diarrhea, there are easy parameters. For bowel habits or for abdominal comfort, okay, we have now agreed upon that, for example, a symptom score is a valid surrogate marker of abdominal comfort. So that's the second step in your research, or in the research, how to define. If you have a very interesting functionality, but you can't find any reliable marker or surrogate marker, just forget it, go to the next area. The third thing you have to think, because we know now that this is a dynamic design, it's not a static design, we have to see whether we can find a challenge model where there is either a trigger here or there is something which changes the coils here, which mimics real life. And we have to show to regulatory boards that this challenge model is really what happens in real life. Because if you have a nice model, you can study it, of course. If you want to study the ability to withstand, for example, a gastroenteritis, you can have a population which is traveling to some countries where the risk is very high that they get a gastroenteritis. That is a model. Perhaps you use with healthy individuals and give them a sort of E. coli and look at what is the response. That's another model. So we have to see, or you, for example, if you think that changing gastric acid secretion is a model which is valid, you can use that. So look at at a model which mimics the real life, because that's what the authorities are interested in. And we have already talked a little bit about the study population. So the study population, in my view, is an adequate study population as long as what happens here and what happens here and here is the same in the population and is in your target consumer population. So although this looks perhaps very, very trivial to you, I think it gives us hands and tools how to design this type of studies and how to think from the beginning. I had one spare slide which I just decided to use, and that is this one, because these functionalities not necessarily have to be at the level of the gut. The functionality could also be somewhere else in the body. For example, the brain. I think in some years of time we will be able to show that by changing the microbiota we will be able to change some brain function. There are clear indications that we are able to do that. And we have already, for example, shown that by adding butyrate at the luminal site in the colon, visceral perception, which is actually at the brain level, is going down, is decreased, so it's improved. And it is not, it could be, for example, that even not only cognition, but even behavior can be changed by changing gut function. So don't, in terms of functionality, don't confine it to the gut itself, but I would advise that we look at the whole body. That was my short presentation.